Good evening. My name is Joe Sam Robinson. It's my pleasure to have with us tonight Dr. Buck Melton. Welcome, Buck. We've certainly had many a useful interchange. And tonight we're going to depend on your legal abilities to discuss something that's before the nation in great detail. And that's use of the Rico statutes to basically, in Atlanta, Georgia, refer criminal charges against about 20 arch Republicans, including the former president and leading contender for the Republican nomination this time. Okay, and that seems to be quite a story. And what are your viewpoints on that? Certainly the Rico, I guess, statute was used against the mafia, and then the Atlanta District Attorney has used it against gangs, yes, criminal gangs. Are your comments about that?
Well, there's a federal Rico statute, and you're right. That really the origin of that statute, I can't remember the exact. I think it was back in the '60s, maybe the early '70s. And then there's a state Rico statute, and Rico stands for Racketeer, Influence, and Corrupt Organizations Act, and it's essentially a conspiracy statute. And conspiracy in criminal law is it's when two or more people essentially agree that they're going to break the law. Even if they don't get to the point of actually breaking it, the agreement itself becomes the criminal enterprise that can be prosecuted. So
you can be put in prison without breaking a law if you contemplate breaking one.
That's an interesting way of putting it. It's just about every crime. There are some minor exceptions, but just about every crime has to have two components to it, and it's almost a philosophical interest. First of all, you have to have a criminal intent, a state of mind, and then you have to have the criminal act. And one of the classic examples in law school is, let's say that I'm sleepwalking, and forget for a moment how we know this, but we know beyond a doubt that I am sleepwalking. And so there's no volitional action on my conscious part. And while I'm sleepwalking, I pick up a gun and shoot you. Now, there is certainly a criminal act that I have shot you, I've battered you, hurt you,
yes,
maybe even killed you. But if we know for certain that I'm sleepwalking, there is no criminal intent. So I'm not culpable there. I'm not guilty. So a flip side is if I sit here thinking that I hate you and I wish you would just drop dead, but I don't do anything to bring that about, then there's no crime there. Even if you should happen to drop dead right now, you suddenly have a stroke because I haven't caused that. You have to have the mental state connected to the action.
That's quite a slippery slope.
It is indeed.
From my just casual examination. So you're on drugs, you're on alcohol, you've had a head injury, whatever. There are many times that your mentation is not 100%. And can you be excused for evil acts under the?
Yes, sometimes you can and sometimes you can't. All of it is premised on the idea of, first of all, free will, and secondly, a sense of moral responsibility. But for instance, let's say that I deliberately get drunk in order to damp down my nervous feelings about the fact that I'm going to go shoot you tonight.
Yes.
And I am so drunk out of my mind that I don't know what I'm doing, but I still shoot you. That's voluntary intoxication, and that would not be a bar to prosecution. On the other hand, let's say somebody slips me something and I'm not aware of it, or I have an adverse reaction to medication, then that would be involuntary intoxication. But as you say, there's a whole continuum there, a whole spectrum.
Well, that sounds interesting to me. I don't doubt that in some circumstances the legal system has blundered on these issues, but I'll move past that. But it does seem interesting to me that you could, just going back to my initial statement, You could be plotting something and not do it, and that would be a conspiracy. We decided not to. We've had these intense conversations about robbing a bank or, I don't know, doing away with your wife, whatever, talking about it. No, it was just whatever. I never did anything.
Yes.
And then, well, you're going to prison for conspiracy. Everyone that seems to be, to me, unacceptable.
Well,
that particular.
I largely agree with you, but before we even get to that point, let's take one more step down the general theoretical road. How can anybody really truly know what is going on in someone else's mind? And yet you have to have the element of criminal intent, or mens rea, as lawyers like to call it. Well, the law essentially says a lot of the times you can infer the guilty mind, the mens rea, by the external actions. I mean, sometimes it's easy. If I say, I hate you, I want to kill you, somebody ought to kill you. But otherwise, it's a little bit grayer area. But with a conspiracy, the mental state itself, in a sense, becomes the action, as you were pointing out. I'm reminded of Clarence Darrow, who, of course, is one of the, shall we say, flashiest defense attorneys in American history. And he said that all conspiracy, and he was talking about this mainly in terms of labor disputes and union violence, but he said that conspiracy is essentially a thought crime. And he said that, of course, before Orwell in 1984, but I think Orwell's name for it would be crime think.
Yes.
But yeah, it makes me uncomfortable too, because it's a crime of, in some sense, it's a crime of thought.
Well, I mean, just to proceed with this, so we have this very tense national dilemma. We have horrible centrifugal forces afoot in our nation. And one of the ideas is that there was a criminal conspiracy to basically steal the election, I guess would be the term that might be used. So it would be a criminal act if you said, well, I'm going to just toss the ballot boxes in the river and discount all these votes and say I'm the winner. So all of those people would have been disenfranchised, all those bad things would have happened. And so that seems to be the origin of the crime. And then people that participated in attempting to do that would in fact be guilty, even if they didn't do it. So point number one, just to me observing this, they actually didn't do anything. There were no, as far as I can see, no ballots were tossed in the river. That nothing happened. And then point number two, which I think is a really telling point, is that people actually believed that the election was wrongful, and they thought the free speech was to point this out. And indeed, you can imagine a circumstance in the future where if people, I don't believe this, side X won the election. I believe it was unfair. They did something terrible to win the election, and I wish to protest that. And I think they did this incorrectly, and then presumably the people that said that could be prosecuted for a conspiracy, in that they must have imagined that they were exercising criminal intent. So that I'm the prosecutor, I'm going to say, well, that was obviously criminal intent. You didn't really believe that. And secondly, it's even if you didn't do anything, then just the criminal intent was enough. It seems just an excuse to basically toss people in prison and really, as tense as our country is, make things worse if in fact this becomes the circumstances we have. You just can't basically protest something or attempt to. The evidence is so powerful here. I want to I want to undo it.
Well, I'm going to push back a little bit. I'm not going to push back a lot because I'm in fundamental agreement with you on a lot of that.
Yes.
And even with regards to the Trump
Right.
charges here. But you keep on saying, but I didn't do anything. Well, once again, you're getting into the realm of act. So if I call you up, you're a politician and
Right.
I'm a mobster, and I call you up, I say, if you don't vote the way I want you to,
Right.
then you, your wife, and your kids are all going to be dead by morning.
Right.
Now, I don't actually kill you, your wife, and your kids, but have I done something? Yes, I spoke. I communicated something to you that was contrary to the public interest that influenced you in a serious way. So you have to be careful when you're talking about act. And why would we do that? There's a sort of sliding scale, and one of the purposes of criminal law, one of several purposes, is to deter people from going down this road of bad effects on society. So the lowest level is solicitation. I come to you and I say, "Can I buy some marijuana from you?" And you haven't said yes, you haven't said no. But that's sort of solicitation. Then there's conspiracy when you say, yeah, I might be, I'll sell you some marijuana, but we don't actually go through the sale. Then there's attempt when you actually pull out the marijuana and I pull out the wad of cash. And then there's the completed crime, which we actually do the criminal exchange. So you have to be careful when you say they didn't do anything. Now, once again, I fundamentally agree with you because conspiracy is that hazy area between thought and act. But once again, I would say that discussing it itself does become the act because you don't want even people discussing things. As for legitimacy, that opens up a whole new can of worms. That would be mistake of fact. So if I can show that I genuinely, truly believed that I won the election, then that might be a mistake of fact that would negate the intent to commit a crime. So,
well, it's rather good interchange just now. Your comments are well received.
Mm-hmm.
I will make this statement that I've sort of tried to basically question the way these criminal charges are being produced, but it should be said that actually this was a pretty terrible thing that President Trump was undertaking, and I don't know if that the danger, the downside of this has been neutrally and appropriately discussed. But as I understand it, the lawyer X, who was a conservative law pundit, law professor, came up with a way to basically overturn the election. This is a way to do it, would be his thought. And it would be that when the votes were counted, that Vice President Pence would be, as I understand this, maybe I don't have my facts correctly stated, but he would be doing the count. He's supervising the count, and presumably people were going to turn up there, from different states that have different sets of ballots there, and that if he chose to recognize the ballots from disputed states and that venue, then presumably, despite the evidence contrary to this assertion, Trump would be put in again. Well, of course, were that to have happened, if that actually had occurred, I mean, the events would be unspeakable. Mm-hmm. I think if actually, presumably, this law professor's plan had happened, then the country would have been thrown into terrible strait. As it is, there's a lot of tension. Mm-hmm. But that particular methodology was bad. And seemingly what's going on in Georgia is that the allegation was that all these votes had been illegally cast or ballot boxes stuffed, as I understand it. And therefore, a lot of votes should be thrown out, and another set of electors, presumably cut out of whole cloth Republican electors, would then step forward saying, I really represent the Georgia voters, and that's the way things would have happened. Now that particular path, to me, just is an example of, I would call it insanity, or enough of a person to suggest doing that in this world. It's just so inappropriate.
Well, I'm not sure I'd call it insanity, but I will say, and I think it's interesting to say this of Trump, whom Trump's handlers cannot shut him up on Twitter or whatever forum he's on. But a lot of times the things that he gets in the most legal trouble for are actually a little bit nebulous. So of course, the really big famous line that Trump said with regard to the Georgia votes is during that phone call to the, I forget who it was, Secretary of State,
yes,
right. And he said something like, can't you find me some more votes? Well, I mean, that could mean anything. That could mean, can we do a recount? Is it, he didn't say, can you go out and manufacture some more votes for me? Which would have been a lot clearer.
I think the conversation was, now let me go back to my insanity comment. So narcissism is a well-known mental disorder. And I think that, I mean, a normal person in those circumstances that is sanity as well has good boundaries attached to it. An extreme narcissistic personality is going to take that step, and that's worrisome to me. I mean, right now you could certainly. It's interesting. This is what we come up with in our country. I mean, our two leading candidates. We can. I hesitate to be too.
300 million people in America, and 350, and this is what we get.
This is it.
Yeah.
But I mean, we can say we can go through President Biden's many defects, and President Trump. I mean, this does seem this narcissistic behavioral pattern. Really, to me, goes to the edge of rationality. I mean, this is, if you're in this circumstance, and this has happened before. I mean, it happened with Nixon, President Nixon. This happened with Al Gore. It's not uncommon to have a very close election, but a reasonable person is going to say, it looks like this is the issue, and maybe I can go to the 40-yard line. If I don't believe this has happened, I can go to the 40-yard line, and then you could say, well, I'll try again next time or something to that effect, but not as an extreme arrangements that this is what happened. Well, having said that, I think both of us would agree that President Trump's actions were certainly unseemly at best. The question would be, are they criminal? And are the people that were on his team in doing this, were they criminal? And did they honestly believe this was what was going on? And let's see, there's a lawyer, the law professor that plotted this strategy. I mean, was that a crime that you're going to go to prison to make these legal suggestions? So in other words, I've got a particular way to win this case, and this is my suggestion, the way we try it in court. And wait a second, if you go in a courtroom and try and do that, you're going to prison. I mean, it seems, that's an iffy thing. And just going through each of the 20 players in this, whatever their role was, I think if you really wanted to be more expansive, you could say that there are thousands of people that shared President Trump's opinion, millions of people. And these millions of people may presumably have done something, I don't know, marched in the street or signed petitions or called up legislators or many people played a role in this. And where did they elect to stop the process? And I don't know. Now, one of the things, or I think the the number of electors, the Republican electors that were produced, and I think these came out of the interstices of the Georgia Republican Party. They appeared, and I think what I know about it is sort of really strident Republicans. Would you like to be an elector? The word went out, and I don't think people understood. If you do this, you're going to prison. I mean, I've certainly. Having lived through the period, there was enough doubt in the circumstance that I don't think people would have assumed they were committing a crime by being an elector, which brings up the question about, quote, criminal intent. If you don't think you're doing a criminal action, you don't think you are, you don't believe you are, and I think one of the electors was a well-meaning high school football coach. Imagine, I mean, I don't know the circumstances, he was some distance from the fury and the lashing of teeth in Washington, and had his opinions, local opinions, and thinking about it, I'm sure he never imagined that he'd be going to prison for decades with charges, and that seems to be such an incredible overreach that I make this comment. It's such an incredible overreach what's taking place in Atlanta.
Well, I partly agree with you on that,
Yes.
but you don't want to push that too far. And I'll give you an example. And this is why we have the reasonable person standard. And you being as cynical about our legal system as you are,
and reason,
yes,
and reason.
you're going to poo-poo the whole reasonable person standard because you're going to say it's manufactured by the particular judge and what she may have had for breakfast that morning. But I remember when I was in fact a law student
Yes.
and at UNC Chapel Hill, there was a fairly heinous murder that took place up there. There was a female jogger, and she was doing an early morning jog, and somebody leaped out at the bushes after her, and
Yes.
She took off running, and he was chasing her, and finally he shot her once, and she went down, and he caught up to her and emptied the gun into her head and killed her.
Yeah.
And he was on record after they arrested him as saying, if she had just had sex with me, I wouldn't have had to kill her.
Right.
And it's not like they were boyfriend and girlfriend. I mean, they've
Right.
never seen each other before. Well, in his mind, he believed, he
Yes.
genuinely believed
That was his standard of reason.
that he had some sort of claim on her or right to have her. And so
She'd been provocative.
so I would assume that you would say in that circumstance, the court was right to say no reasonable person could have held that opinion, even if he genuinely did hold that opinion, and therefore we're not going to allow that defense.
Well, I mean,
I'm assuming you do.
Well, yes,
yeah.
but it does bring the question up
Yes.
about reason, and
yeah.
so as long as that's not a bright line, and there's a lot of give and take in it
Yes.
as to what reason is and not. And then I sort of made the point earlier. There are periods of lucidity that people may have at 1 o'clock in the morning, or that's not present later. And the information that comes into the reasoning facilities is often skewed. So you might, let's say, this a terrible story there, but somehow on his mind, maybe he was a very fundamentalist person, that's what prostitutes did, or whatever, they jogged around, or whatever his. Why did you have this information? And the question to ask is how this opinion came to his mind, and it's certainly a heinous one. But why did he think that? Is there some experience, whatever? And then was he mentally ill? Another thing to say is, if those are his reasons, it seems like he might lack the facility for reason, which is something that can be probed a little bit.
Yeah. Well, you'd make a good defense attorney in that case. So, I mean, I hope you're not arguing, well, the criminal justice system and the legal system and taking somebody to court is in itself such bad punishment that even if we find him not guilty and that he had a reasonable belief that he had a right to sex with her, that taking him to court was punishment enough, so we shouldn't have charged him at all. I mean, that's slippery slope. That's where we end up. And I say again that I fundamentally agree with you. I want to shift grounds a little bit here, but at the state level, I read the indictment, and it's about 90 pages.
Oh, did you? Good.
And I was looking for real meat, but regarding Trump, it's just conspiracy to do this, conspiracy to do that. And some of the underlying facts, one of them was that Trump and his co-conspirators reserved a room in the state capitol to discuss the meeting of the electors. But that was the fact that justified this charge of conspiracy, that they reserved a room in the Atlanta in the state capitol. That's the fact. I mean, that's just, and that, of course, I agree with you. That's total overreach.
And I think some of the Republican senators are facing long prison sentences.
Yes.
For maybe that's their role in this, and a series of charges are cast at their door of felony charges.
Yes.
You did this, you did that. And just so merely, and I'll say this, merely discussing, this outcome, the election outcome was probably dishonest, maybe this happened, maybe that happened. And I think we could have another discussion about that. But just say, and we haven't gotten too much into free speech and the Constitution protecting free speech. So conspiracy and free speech. It seems to me the Rico deal is predicated on obtaining selfish money, I guess you'd say, getting things. I have a very definite self-interested way to get this money, and that's where I'm conspiring to injure other people and take the money. Okay, that's where things work. But here, I think you could get into a situation where a person may not have any direct benefit, I'd say, or only a secondary benefit. If I want to discuss this. I'm a state senator. I want a room in the state capitol. Good. I want to discuss what's wrong with the electoral process. Let's have a discussion about it. And out of the discussion, maybe it could be said, these following 3 or 4 bad things happen. How can they be prevented? And should the people that committed these 3 or 4 bad things, should we have some punishment for them? And were things heinous enough that we were going to, some other arrangement needs to be taken place. But certainly, in these circumstances, the free speech is a big deal.
Well, once again, free speech. I call you up and I say, you vote my way, or you and your wife and kids are dead by morning.
Right.
There's no reasonable person and no lawyer I know of would say that is protected speech under the First Amendment. Now, you want to push it to the gray area. Of course, this is why we have trials. I mean, the way the common law system got started is when we're not sure, let's bring in the jury and let's ask the community, what is the custom of the community in a circumstance like this? And once again, I know you're down on juries just like you're down on judges and lawyers, but find me a better system. Find the specialist who doesn't have a dog in the race. So in this case, I would say the reasonable person standard is if every judge in the country that a fraudulent election claim has been brought before, including judges that were appointed by Trump himself, if every one of those judges has said, we have not found any sufficient fraud to call this election into question, and if you've got an official mechanism in place in every state to certify the election, at what point does it start sounding like the mothership has arrived, conspiracy theory, that no, the election has been stolen by the deep dark forces that we know are there, but we can't prove. At what point does it become unreasonable?
Well, 2 points, and it's about time to go, I think. Point number one, you suggested, what can we do that's better? Artificial intelligence is out there.
Oh, you're kidding me. You're kidding me.
No, I'm not kidding you.
2001, A Space Odyssey.
No.
Okay.
I mean, but in other words, a lot of issues can be stated slightly in a clearer fashion.
AI, which I'm not going there.
Right.
AI programmed by fallible human beings at a level that.
No, you still have the person that flies the airplane, but you could say, I don't know, the number of times, I don't know, someone walks down this highway, how many 10,000 people, 40,000, 60,000, how many times do they trip and fall last year? What are the percentages? What are the etiologies of people tripping and falling? And these are just getting those facts out there.
So we will convict an innocent person just on the basis of the stats. Are you comfortable with that?
No. What I am comfortable with is trying to reform some of the justice system, or at least making it better, since it appears to me.
Well, I agree with you on that.
Just at a polite distance, those are issues that are not good. And then finally, yes, what your statements about, and I think this deserves some more conversation. The ideas about President Trump's assertion that the election was stolen, why he would think that against all evidence, and why would his supporters think that. I think that's worthy of another discussion.
It certainly is.
All right, well, good. Thank you. Thanks, Buck. We'll talk some more.
Indeed.
Thank you.
This program is brought to you by the Georgia Neurosurgical Institute. For over 50 years, rendering neurosurgical care to patients of all social conditions, treating complicated problems involving the brain, spine, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves, endeavoring to encourage quality care, medical research, innovation, and education on a local, national, and international basis.